In the twilight grasp of the Santa Lucia mountains, the sun spilled its last golden breaths over the jagged peaks, setting the sky ablaze with hues of scarlet and amethyst. The once vibrant forest hues dimmed, succumbing to the encroaching night, while shadows stretched across the land like dark, ethereal figures. I found myself on a narrow trail, its path worn by the footsteps of countless travelers before me, yet now it felt as if I was the sole human in a world forgotten by time. The air was cool and heavy with the scent of damp earth and pine, and the silence was so profound I could hear my own heartbeat thumping in my ears. Something primal within me urged to return to the safety of my camp, but an inexplicable compulsion compelled me deeper into the wilderness. As the light waned, the ancient mountains seemed to whisper with the voices of spirits long past, and my mind began to play tricks on me. I thought I saw movement in the corner of my eye, a mere flicker, but when I turned my head, there was nothing, only the stoic trees and the ever-darkening sky. It was then that I felt it, a penetrating gaze, the sensation of being watched from high above. My eyes darted upwards to the ridge where the mountains met the heavens, and my breath caught in my throat. There, silhouetted against the dying light, were the dark watchers. They were towering, enigmatic figures draped in robes that seemed to ripple with the wind, their wide-brimmed hats casting their faces in inscrutable shadow. For a moment, time itself seemed to freeze, and the air grew colder. I knew the legends, tales spoken in hushed tones by the locals, stories passed down through generations. These were the guardians of the mountains, they said, or harbingers of something far more sinister. Though every fiber of my being screamed to flee, my feet were rooted to the spot, transfixed by the haunting spectacle. The watchers stood motionless, their unseen eyes fixed upon me. A shiver ran down my spine, a chill that seemed to seep into my very soul. The silence was no longer peaceful, it was oppressive, as if the earth itself held its breath. A fog began to roll in, tendrils of mist weaving through the trees, encircling me. The world turned ethereal, and the figures above began to blur and distort. Were they but shadows, tricks of the light and fog? I could no longer tell. As the mist thickened, the dark watchers began to fade, their forms dissolving into the swirling vapor. Panic welled within me, a desperate urge to escape the suffocating embrace of the mountain. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum of war. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, they were gone, vanished as if they were never even there. The weight of their gaze lifted, and the forest seemed to exhale, the tension seeping away into the night. I did not linger. With trembling legs, I turned and hurried down the hill, away from the ridge and its special centennials. The darkness was complete now, the stars obscured by the dense canopy above. But even as I made my way back to the flickering safety of the campfire, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had not been alone in the mountains. The further that I walked, the more I felt the echoes of the watchers' presence, as though their unseen eyes followed me through the underbrush, their whispers carried on the wind that rustled the leaves. The campfire's glow was a beacon in the night, a promise of warmth and light in the midst of the oppressive darkness. My fellow campers' laughter jolted me back to reality, a stark reminder, the contrast to the eerie stillness that I had just escaped. Their faces, illuminated by the dance of flames, were carefree and unsuspecting of the mountain's hidden watchers. Yet as I approached the circle of light, I couldn't shake the uneasiness that clung to me like the mountain mist. I took my place among my friends, accepting the comfort of human companionship, but the feeling of being observed persisted. I cast glances over my shoulder, half expecting to see the tall, cloaked figures emerging from the shadows. As the night deepened, we shared stories and songs, the crackling fire warding off the chill of the mountain air. But no amount of merry distraction could erase the image of the dark watchers from my mind, for I knew deep down that they were still up there, on the ridges, silent and inscrutable. The dark watchers had retreated into the realm of myth once more, but their enigmatic presence had left an indelible mark on my soul. The Dark Watchers are described as being tall, shadowy figures that keep their distance from humans. They are said to be far taller than the average human, sometimes up to 10 feet tall. They are essentially silhouettes of opaque shadow with no facial or bodily features. From their silhouettes, many have reported them wearing wide-brimmed hats or cloaks. Despite the lack of facial features, those who have been in the presence of Dark Watchers report knowing that the entity was watching or observing them. When approached, they simply vanish. They most often appear in the time between late afternoon and dusk. Some iterations of the legend say that Dark Watchers accept small gifts such as fruits or nuts, though the purpose of such gifts is not elaborated on. Some iterations of the legend say that Dark Watchers accept small gifts such as fruits or nuts, though the purpose of such gifts is not elaborated on. According to the internet, the Dark Watchers were seen by the Chumash people prior to the area's colonialization. With it not being the first time, the internet is wrong. Researchers have yet to find any concrete accounts of such entities in Chumash lore. The first known accounts are from the Spanish settlers in the 1700s. These settlers dubbed the Watchers Los Vigilantes Oscuros, which is where we get the Dark Watchers from today. Though people who frequent the area claim to have seen the entities at least somewhat routinely, there are surprisingly few written accounts. I'd like to talk about a couple different times when the Dark Watchers were mentioned in pop culture. It was first mentioned by a poet named Robinson Jeffers. Jeffers wrote a poem called Such Counsels You Gave Me, which was published in a poetry collection in 1937. In it, Jeffers wrote of an encounter with a watcher, describing it as having light hair and a scar on its face. It then faded into the shadows beyond the ridge from which it emerged. It is not known whether the poem was based on a personal encounter by Jeffers himself or simply a retelling of the lore. The next written account came in John Steinbeck's story, Flight, which appeared in a story collection called The Long Valley, published in 1938. This account is not nearly as detailed or extensive as the Jeffers poem, but it does casually mention the Dark Watchers, which insinuates that knowledge of the entities was widespread enough to mention them by name with no further mention. John Steinbeck's own son, Thomas, allegedly saw the entities more than once during his lifetime. Thomas, in an effort to understand the phenomena and its roots, collaborated with Benjamin Brode on a book exploring the subject. The book is titled In Search of the Dark Watchers, and there are dozens of lesser-known encounters with the Dark Watchers. Just look them up. Mysterious Universe author Brent Swancer compiled a handful of more recent encounters And after reading through all of these accounts, the encounters seem to have a few things in common. First, the person is usually walking alone. Second, they feel drawn to look at an area just off the trail where the entity is standing. And third, the entities are in shadow, which obscures their distinguishing factors, or they just don't have faces. Physically, the watchers seem to always appear similar between encounters, which begs the question, is there a group of them, or just a few? There are a wide array of explanations for the Dark Watchers that range from scientific to fantastical. The first theory that I will discuss is that the Watchers are simply hallucinations due to exhaustion and isolation. On one hand, this absolutely makes sense because mountain hiking is a very strenuous task. And many people set out for their hikes unprepared, or they end up exhausted, dehydrated, and delirious. So it's not unusual to have auditory and visual hallucinations while in such a vulnerable and compromised state. The second theory being infrasound. Infrasound is the low frequency sound that is below what humans can register as audible. However, the body still physically registers infrasound physically. The organs of the inner ear still register the sensation of sound. People who experience infrasound often report feeling dread, vertigo, dizziness, or the feeling of being watched. This explains some of the encounters, but not the direct sightings of the Dark Watchers. The third theory is the Brocken specter. A Brocken specter is a phenomenon that occurs when the sun is behind a person and their shadow is projected onto fog or clouds in front of them. The effect is an enormous shadowy figure standing before the person. This is far more likely the explanation, though it is possible that people are seeing Brocken specter while experiencing infrasound. And the last theory being a supernatural one. Is it so far-fetched that these beings are actually spirits? The United States of America is a country founded on bloodshed, and it stands on land taken by force. Is it so outlandish to consider that perhaps some of the spirits of those who were wronged during that process struck around and are carefully watching the trespassers and colonizers to this day? Or maybe it's a combination of all these factors coming together to conjure those eerie sights. So what do you guys think? Is it a cryptid? A ghost? Maybe just an urban legend? Who knows? Maybe now let's just call it a cryptid. For hundreds of years, shadowy people have been seen in the Santa Lucia mountains near Big Sur, California. These figures are often seen as taller than humans, wearing cloaks and hats. Who or what are the Dark Watchers of Santa Lucia? Are they spirits? Or are they something more sinister? Alright guys, thank you for listening to this small but mighty video. The Great Watchers, the Dark Watchers, guys. And I hope you liked it. If you like it, share it out, like, comment. I like my comments. And I hope to see you guys here next time on Tales Told in the Dark. Love you guys.